Hello, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are starting this evening's program. Shall we please be on our feet as the speaker and the chair take the high table? I humbly ask that we put our mobile phones on silent. Thank you.
Right. Good evening, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. My name is Professor J, Assistant Honorary Secretary, Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences. My role here is to provide brief introductory remarks and to introduce the chair for the event, who will subsequently introduce the distinguished speaker. President of the Academy, past presidents of the Academy, vice presidents of the Academy, fellows of the Academy, ambassadors, high commissioners, consular and special desk officers for science and related matters, other distinguished members of the diplomatic corps present, deans of faculties, researchers, lecturers, students, the media, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of fellows of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences, Ghana's premier learned society, I welcome all of us to the Academy Special Lecture for the year 2024. We are kindly reminded that we are streaming live via Zoom and also on the Academy's Facebook and YouTube channels. Regarding the occasional lecture, from time to time and as the need arises, the Academy provides a platform for the hosting of an occasional or special lecture outside its scheduled programs for a given year. And this is a courtesy specially afforded the speakers after very careful deliberation by the Council of the Academy. In this respect, should we recall that Professor Julia Higgins, FRS DBE, delivered a special lecture to a packed audience at the British Council Hall on the topic, The Responsibilities of a Scientist, on the 8th of February, 2006. Subsequently, in 2007, a special lecture was delivered on the topic, Discovery of a Unique Feature of Tonal Linguistics, the Mid-Pitch Arrest Phenomenon in the Krobo-Dangbe Mother Tongue of Southeast Ghana, by Professor Felix Konete Aholu, FGA. Similarly, on 3rd May 2016, Professor Kwesi Yanka, former honorary secretary and fellow of the Academy, delivered an occasional lecture on the topic, the 3-year, 4-year school pendulum towards a stable public policy on senior high school education in Ghana. Professor Felix Konete Aholu's again delivered a lecture titled History Surpasses Science in honor of centenarian Dr. Ivan Samfom, a fellow and past president of the Academy, on 31st January 2021. In more recent memory, we recall that Professor Gerard Moreau, a French scientist and pioneer in the field of electrical engineering and lasers, delivered a special lecture on the topic Extreme Light, its benefits to science and society, as recent as December 2022. This year's special lecture is at the instance of Professor MAJID EZZATI, Chair in Global Environmental Health, Imperial College London, who is visiting Ghana and has kindly agreed to deliver a special lecture as part of his activities whilst in the country. We are delighted that through the instrumentality of Professor EZZATI and Professor Samuel J. Mensah, FGA, we have support from Pathway to Equitable Healthy Cities, and we are grateful for their support. Now, it is my singular honor to introduce to you the chair for this evening's session. The chair is in the person of Professor Joseph R.A. AYEE. Professor AYEE is the Vice President, Arts Section of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences since 2023. He has held several positions, including the position of Rector, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Dean and Head of Department in 3 higher education institutions in Ghana as well as South Africa. Professor AYEE was elected Fellow of the Academy in 2005 and served as Assistant Honorary Secretary of the Arts Section the years 2014-2015, and subsequently as Honorary Treasurer 2016-2017. Professor AYEE was also the occupant of the UNESCO United Nations Leadership Academy Chair in Leadership Studies, University of Jordan in 2001, and the Emeka Anyaku Visiting Chair of Commonwealth Studies, Institute of Commonwealth Studies, University of London in 2013. He has served as a member of a team of experts that drafted Ghana's National Decentralization Policy Framework and Action Plan, and the National Decentralization Policy and Strategy 2020-2024. Professor AYEE is a prolific author and writer who has authored over 200 publications in several areas spanning political science, public policy, and administration. His latest publications include 3 co-edited books. 1, Think Tanks, Governance and Development in Africa, Political Institutions, Party Politics and Communication in Ghana, 3 Decades of the Fourth Republic, and a 3rd book, Public Sector Management and Economic Governance in Ghana, 3 Decades of the Fourth Republic. Professor AYEE's current research interests span higher education governance and management, politicians and bureaucrats' relationship, political transitions, and democratic backsliding. So on this note, I would say, respectfully, with a round of applause, we would applaud our chair.
Thank you, Assistant Honorary Secretary of the Sciences Section, President of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences, past presidents, current and past vice presidents, fellows of the Academy, my dear students, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we are here for an occasional lecture, and I warmly welcome all of you. The lecture could belong to both either the sciences or the arts. So when you see me after the lecture, straying into the area of the sciences, you should know that it is a transdisciplinary lecture. And the topic is very interesting, cities as unequal opportunities, for good health. Cities as unequal opportunities, for good health. And we have a very renowned scholar in the field who will be speaking to us. And our speaker this evening is Professor MAJID EZZATI. He's a professor of global environmental health at Imperial College London and the director of the World Health Organization, collaborating, Center on non-communicable diseases, NCD, surveillance, epidemiology, and modeling. He trained in electrical and computer engineering, followed by a PhD in science, technology, and environmental policy. So for somebody to move from electrical and computer engineering to science, technology, and environmental policy shows that he is versatile. He can do a lot of things. For over 25 years, Professor EZZATI and his research group have conducted field studies on environment and health in countries in Africa and China. He led the World Health Organization's comparative risk assessment study, which was the first consistent global analysis of behavioral, environmental, nutritional, psychosocial, and metabolic risk factors, and formed the scientific core of the World Health Report 2002, Reducing Risks, Promoting Healthy Life. He now leads the NCD Risk Factor Collaboration and co-leads NCD Countdown 2030, worldwide scientific collaborations that aim to strengthen the evidence for more effective NCD prevention and management. He also leads Pathways to Equitable Health Cities, a global partnership that aims to improve population health and enhance health equity in cities around the world. Professor MAJID EZZATI is a fellow of the UK Academy of Medical Sciences. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Professor MAJID EZZATI.
Good afternoon, Academy Vice Presidents and President, past Presidents and Vice Presidents, and Assistant Honorary Secretary, and distinguished guests, and especially the students who are here to look towards the future. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm no stranger to Accra. I have been I have had the privilege to be coming to Accra very regularly since 2006. So longer than many people in this room have been actually alive and before many people in the room were born. And it's a city that for a long time, I was actually spending about as much of my time here in 2007 as I was spending anywhere else in the world. So it is a privilege to be here and talking about cities. Let me see if I can make the mouse work. What is a presentation without a technology? Already shrinking. They are becoming smaller. So it's a world that's increasingly urban. If I can make this. In the field that I'm in public health, people tend to think of cities as very negatively, but actually they tend to be good places to live. At least since we had modern sanitation, it was the case that cities tended to have good health and good life. So you can see a graph on here from the work of Sam Preston, the great demographer, that shows that in 3 French cities where there were good death records kept, from the time of introduction of modern sanitation, life expectancy, longevity of people immediately increased, and it just kept going up. And in fact, it goes farther. In the 1950s, the United Nations commissioned Nathan Kafetz, again, another great demographer, to write about rural to urban migration. And this paper from 1971 summarizes what Kafetz wrote and some of the additional evidence since then. And it actually argued, which in many ways seems intuitive, which is that people go to cities because they are better off in cities. So there may be issues. They may live in slums, but they are still better off than where they were living, and that is why they migrate. If they didn't have the advantage, they wouldn't migrate. And I argued that in better life and better health and better nutrition in cities is the main reason that slums get created, because people migrate. And this situation has continued. So this is comparing height of 19-year-olds. So for many people in the room, they are about the age that you will soon be reaching between urban and rural areas in different regions of the world. And if I take my graph here, this is sub-Saharan Africa. In every region of the world, there is an urban height advantage. So if the students in this room were to go and stand next to students in rural parts of Ghana, they would be on average taller. And in many parts of the world, this advantage has been actually decreasing, but in Africa, interesting, it has had a slight increase. So cities in Africa especially are providing an advantage compared to rural areas in terms of nutrition. So if there is ever a basketball match, the cities would probably, the students from the cities would win. And this situation continues throughout the world. So this is evidence from the United States and the UK. And in every one of them, larger cities have a health advantage. So in the US, this is what's called excess non-metro mortality. So people who live in smaller towns and rural areas have died faster and at larger numbers than in big cities in the US. And since the 1980s, this has been increasing. Similar things. This is differences in inequality. And it goes across all races in the United States, that in every race, people who live in cities live longer than they do in rural areas. And this is the United States. This is England, where there is a major advantage in London compared to other places. And this situation is also in many places where child mortality remains still high, these tend to be lower income settings. So this is showing the rural child mortality and urban child mortality. Any point that's above the line, children die more in rural areas than in cities, which is, as you can see, most countries, these are from the demographic health surveys. But cities are more unequal. So they are better off, but they are more unequal places. And again, going to child mortality, this is the rural to urban amongst the richest, and this is among the poorest. And sorry, this is a still improvement. This is a still better health in cities. And what this graph is showing is that even for the poor, cities are better places to be than rural areas. So for child mortality, the rural to urban ratio for the richest is here, and for the poor, any number that's greater than 1 means that rural areas are worse off. And as you can see, regardless of whether it's for the rich, which is here, or for the poor, rural areas are worse off. So a rich person is better off being in a city, and a poor person is better off being in the cities. This is also, again, from the work using the demographic health surveys, and people have compared to the rural areas in different parts of cities, in towns, in cities, in slums in towns, and in slums in cities in different countries. And in every place, a negative number means that they are better off than rural areas, and even city slums are better off than rural areas. This is the case of child mortality. This is the case of child malnutrition, and better off in every place, including in the slums. And for child mortality, city slums are better off. Small town or slums are about the same. And here is a last example of this cancer mortality in England. And these green points here are London. We can see that this is the best off, this is the poorest, and it goes up with poverty, but London is the exception. So the poor in London don't look like the poor elsewhere, and they are better off. In fact, this evidence was pointed out in two papers that were written in 2008. 2008 was a significant year because it was the year that the world as a whole became 50% urban. So half the people in the world in 2008 were living in cities, and that continued. And this is work that's by Chris Dye, who was at the World Health Organization at the time, and argued that cities are better off. And David Leon actually went farther and said that epidemiology and public health has generally been negative about cities, whereas many economists have tended to be positive. They have appreciated the value of cities, and he talked about the health improvements in cities. They both asked whether situations like obesity are worse in cities. And what you see here is that each of these lines is showing one country. And this number is showing the difference in body mass index, a measure of weight gain. In cities compared to rural areas, it's positive. So cities have tended to actually have more weight gain. People are better off, they may eat more, but these numbers are all getting smaller over time. So in fact, most of the recent weight gain in the world has been in rural areas. But cities are unequal. So this is from London. This is showing life expectancy in different small areas of London. And there is, within London, within a single city, there is about a 20 or 30-year difference in life expectancy. That's the same difference between a lower middle income country and a country in Europe. So we see all of that in London, that entire range. And what you can see here is Kensington and Chelsea, one of the wealthiest areas of London. These are some of the homes that probably would be costing tens of millions of pounds. And this is Grenfell Tower in the same area within a matter of 100 meters, a place that burned a low-income housing, and 70 people died in the fire because it was badly built. So within hundreds of meters in London, you see massive inequalities that are about the same difference between a country in Europe and a low and middle income country. And again, going back to the analysis that was done from the demographic health surveys, This is showing the ratio of poorest to richest. So that's a measure of inequality. And if a point is above the line, that inequality is larger in cities. So cities are better off, the urban poor are better off, but they are just very unequal because the rich in the cities are so well off that the poor just can't keep up. One of the things that we have been focusing on as a group, including with Professor Ajay Mensah and colleagues at the University of Ghana, Professor Bawa, colleagues at the University of Ghana, but with colleagues globally, is trying to actually understand health inequalities in cities in a way that it can be addressed. And it is an interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary work. So we want what has been our aim and what we think the scientific agenda in this area should be. Well, we need to understand the urban environment and in a way that's socioeconomically sensitive, so that we can measure inequalities. We need to understand health outcomes and we want to understand health inequalities, as cities change. And so we are a very data-oriented study, and all of our work is very data-oriented. And a part of that is because we actually believe that when data fails, societies fail. So we were talking about it, that something, if it's not measured, it rarely exists. And that's the percent that, so we try to bring data to difficult problems. I have no idea how that went there, but let me try it. Okay. So we have been working in 5 countries, Canada, United Kingdom, Ghana, Bangladesh, and China. And going forward, the work will actually be focusing only in Ghana and Rwanda, in 4 cities in these 2 countries. We measure, we model, and we focus on issues of urban services, things such as improvements in healthcare or education that cities provide, issues of water, transportation, and built environment. As we go forward, this will become increasingly focused on climate change. So what do we try to do for our measurement? That our task is to measure variations in health and the living environment. All of the things we can see with our eyes, but how do we put numbers on this? How do we bring data to this? The data are very spread out. They are censuses, they are surveys, they are health records, they are the infrastructure data, the housing data, and increasingly images. And I'll talk about images, satellite images, and street images. And we use a series of methods from data science that you broadly call supervised and unsupervised learning. This really means everything in statistics and data science. But we try to put people in everything. So we don't go out and measure things because we can do it. We do it because it matters to people. And we have been disseminating this. So for any of you who go on YouTube, you can go on YouTube, and there was a whole session that we actually had at a major conference about the applications of modern data science tools to urban equity issues. So I'll use 2 sets of examples. For the next 5 minutes, I'll talk about London only, the city I live in, the city I know, and then I'll focus a fair amount on Accra, a city that I don't live in, but I'd like to think that I know it a little bit. So London, I mentioned earlier, London is much better off than the rest of England. But within it still has, London has about a 3 or 4 year life expectancy advantage over the rest of England. And that's a reasonably large amount, but within it, it has about a 20-year or more inequality. And over time, we used data that had the deaths, the time of death, the age of the person, and the location where they live to quantify life expectancy longevity for nearly 5,000 small areas in London. So this is really granular. This is the most granular we have ever been able to do. And what we see is that in London, there is inequalities. This is from the worst off to the highest one. And over time, those inequalities have increased. So the top has gone up more than the bottom. The places that were at the bottom haven't changed much. The places at the top have changed. So it's become over time, over a period of about 2 decades, a more unequal place. But interestingly, these are the 33 boroughs of London. London is made up of 33 boroughs. And these lines are showing life expectancy in the district as a whole, and this is showing it in the inequality. Everywhere life expectancy has gone up, but everywhere, in every one of these 33 boroughs, it's become more unequal over time. And so inequalities in London are very local. I mentioned you just need to go a few hundred meters to go from a place that can live 10 years longer than the other on average. We also took used real estate websites, and we gathered all of the sales in housing in London over a period of about 2 decades. We also analyzed these by location. And what we see is that central London, large increases, but very expensive. Also parts of southwest London. This is actually where the Imperial College London campus is, which is why most of the professors don't live near the campus, because it's one of the most expensive places. There are other pockets that are expensive, and outer London relatively less. The increase has been a bit different, actually. Northwest London, northeast, North London, has increased a fair amount. It's still not the most expensive, but it has increased a lot. Parts of South London have increased a fair amount, and again, some of them are very expensive around here, and they have increased a fair amount. Others, perhaps not as much. And what the question we ask is that, so how did life expectancy change in places that were expensive in 2002, big turn of the millennium, compared to now, and how much did it change in relation to changing cost of housing? So what we saw was that in places that were really expensive in 2002, life expectancy went up even if price didn't change. So these places were so well off that even if they weren't getting more expensive, life expectancy improved. In places that were low cost, as it became more expensive, life expectancy improved more. But in the rich ones, it didn't really matter how much it changed. So the wealthy just kept getting better, the expensive places. The places that were originally cheap, they only got better if the price went up a lot. So the question that we wanted to ask was that, is really rising price of housing benefiting people who were living there 20 years ago? So we looked at a number of other data sets, population turnaround. And so this is change in population. People who were living, this is based on of linkage of data. People who were living there, were they still living there 2 decades later if it became more expensive? In wealthy areas, it didn't matter how expensive it became. It was the same people living there for most part. In poor areas, there was a change in people. How did it change? Well, it became generally more working ages. So in lower cost areas, which may have been lower income areas, if the price went up a lot, it actually was really young people moving there and working people. And they were generally more educated, they were generally less poor, and they were less likely to be unemployed. This is what people sometimes call gentrification. So places that were poor started changing, and those changes improved health, but not the health of people who were there. Those people were being shifted out to the outer parts of London. It was actually new people. That's why health. Our interpretation of this was, this one more time, the improvements were happening either where prices were already high or got high, but most of this was due to actually change in population of the prices. That price changed a lot. And sometime after we published this, there was actually a report from another group in another academic group that talked about the rise in prices and displacement of people. And our colleagues in Pathways, including Professor Owusu from University of Ghana, had been actually in parallel to this looking at questions of, look, how do cities protect through better housing health of people? Now over to Accra. This should be familiar to many people here. So we wanted to know inequalities in Accra, environmental inequalities at all the scales. This is a satellite image that covers all of Accra. As you start zooming in, you can see differences in areas. You can see here roads that are unpaved, and you can see large bodies of greenery here. Zoom in more here. This would be familiar. Legon and probably parts of either Jamestown or Old Tadam. So big differences in the environment that people experience, and this goes across many things. Again, to bring data on this collectively, colleagues at the University of Ghana and at multiple international universities, we actually made Accra arguably the most densely sensed city, one of the most densely ones in the whole world. A whole set of environmental sensors put around Accra, hard work of many of the colleagues who were running this from University of Ghana, from Imperial, from University of Massachusetts. And we had to start from a blank page. This just hadn't been done before. We had to start coming up with our own designs of these. There are sensors for air pollution, for noise, and these are put in boxes. If you go around Accra right now, there are 10 of these still running. There was a time that we were actually having 20 of these in any given week, and they were moving around Accra week to week. So about 150 spots in Accra were being monitored. They have all kinds of monitors. These monitors had to be robust. They had to withstand the heat, the humidity. They had to be low cost. We had limited budget. They had to be able to be low power because they were using batteries and a whole set of features. And we had to get permission from people to do this, to place these. And we collected a lot of data, thousands and tens of thousands, millions of data points on air pollution, on noise, on weather, images, and these are some of the equipment. So this is the noise data, the air pollution data, temperature, and we had cameras, and every 5 minutes, these cameras were taking an image. So I believe it is probably the Central Ring Road in Asylum Down, that you can see the vendors on the side of the road selling things. And we had cameras that would have night vision, so we could take images at night. What it allowed us to do is truly understand the situation of the environment in Accra. So just to give an example, this is air pollution, this is particles, this is NO2, and you can see that's the Central Ring Road, and these are the major routes that go from Central Accra radially outwards. So higher air pollution along major roads, especially nitrogen dioxide, which tends to be emitted by vehicles. It's a good sign of vehicle emission. And this is the port of Tema, obviously. So again, high pollution where there is large cities. Similar situation with noise, daytime noise, large amounts of noise, high amounts of noise around the major traffic areas, but also the dense parts of city and in Tema again. But at night also, so traffic noise continues through night, and many other places becomes less. We could use some of the methods from AI, and to actually, we also had sound recording, so not just noise, but recordings of sound, 10 seconds for every minute we were doing, and these could be analyzed and look at the sources of noise using AI methods, road transport, animals, much more on the outer part, whereas road transport in the central city, music in the central city, and sometimes when there are the big speakers on the side of the road or the discos that are going, and then human speech, it could be picked up, and you can see that throughout. So the level of noise, and there is evidence that natural noise, so birds tend to be better for health, and things like the road traffic is actually worse for health. We have taken images, and these are some of them, and each of these boxes is actually bordering an item. So there were 20 items that we selected that collectively as an interdisciplinary team, we thought these would be important for people's well-being and environment in Accra. These were persons, street vendors, a series of things that were vehicles, car, trucks, taxis, and then market stalls, cook stoves, umbrellas, which were also market vendors, and then debris and animals. And we trained a neural network, an AI tool to detect these. So we had multiple million images, and we couldn't sit down and manually do this. We did this manually for a few thousand, all of our students collectively, and then use that to train an AI network to be able to do this for everything. And you can see it's remarkable. It can distinguish a taxi from a car, even though they actually look similar. It can pick up at night a car. It can pick up other things. An animal being picked up at the Legon campus. All of these are actually automated, and people being picked up at night, remarkably successful. And this gave us the density of each of these in the city. So I'm showing it for people, market related. This is umbrellas and market stands, large vehicles. So these are buses and lorries, and smaller vehicles, cars and taxis and vans. And so denser in the city center, but people, especially here, this is a place that's actually, there are many people stand and wait for Totos to come, and which means that high density of people. Market related, this is probably the market in Nima, and this is where there is a lot of people, selling items, food and other items along the major roads. Where there were, so this is the correlation where they co-occurring together. People and vehicles were together, people and market related were together, but things such as animals and debris actually were more in the outer parts of the city, so they were negatively correlated. We could look at this over time. So these are the places that it's called high density residential areas. These tend to be more informal settlements, and these tend to be many parts of Nima, Mamobi, Jamestown, and some of the places in Outer Accra that are very densely populated. These are the medium to low density residential. So this is areas outside of the, starting from airport and going towards Legon, and this is the city center, commercial business city center, and these are the pre-urban areas that are getting towards the borders of Greater Accra metropolitan area. This is showing the darker the color, the more of these items. So more people this is, I'll come to the COVID pandemic. This is mostly before pandemic. City center where the government offices are and many of the businesses are very dense, but also in the high density residential areas. Market related, especially dense in the high density residential areas. So again, Nima market would be in here, and small vehicles, cars, denser in the business city center, and all of these are fewer of them in the peri-urban areas. Then comes the pandemic, and because these cameras were still there and collecting the data, we could actually look at what happened during the 3 or 4 weeks of lockdown that Accra had, and what happened after pandemic. So small vehicles, it's going before pandemic, before lockdown, then the numbers go down, it becomes less dark, especially at night they go down, but not as much in the dense areas. Sorry, that's small vehicles, and this is large vehicles. So these are the Totos. Totos especially went down. Look at how much the decline in Totos was, because the government started to regulate them as you go from here to here. They sort of went back mostly post-pandemic, and the small vehicles also went back, but especially in city center. So if people were going to their work in the city center, they would drive when they could. And now I go to market related, and this is one that very, very high density in some of the informal settlements, and also in the city center. It goes down during lockdown. In the dense residential areas, it goes back up. In the city center, it just didn't pick up. So as people started to work remotely and didn't go back as much to work, the people who were making their livelihoods in the business area, they just lost their customers in some ways, and we could actually pick up a signal of that. So the images allowed us to understand how the city was functioning over a space and over time. And so we are now analyzing this over a period of about 3 or 4 years to see, did things really change in the city as a result of COVID lockdown and everything that happened as a result of it? So if I could go back now, we can use this to analyze pollution. If I were to ask any of you which one of these images has more particles in it, you probably would know the answer, that it's the one on the right-hand side, because it's more hazy. So when harmattan comes and that particle in the air that as a result of the dust, that's a form of air pollution. It's not air pollution from combustion, but it's still air pollution. And that makes the air hazy. Airports know this. They don't let planes to land when it's very polluted. And we could use features like this as well as objects to actually analyze air pollution. So all we need images to be able to understand air pollution, or that it tells us. So where this work is going now, as we go forward, is trying to understand heat above and beyond air pollution. We want to know what homes are made of. We are doing measurements, and we are trying to understand, this is work in China, not in Ghana, but trying to understand heat inside homes. So our colleagues are using satellite images to identify whether homes have metal roofs, or whether they have tile roofs, slate roofs, and then together with measurements of temperature, they are trying to understand the heat that people experience. But cities are a collective of items. So they are cars, they are homes, they are greenery, but they're all of these things together. So again, looking at this image, which is taken from the air, we can all say that the two areas on the two sides are very different places. But they are different places for all kinds of reasons. These ones have paved roads. These ones have unpaved roads. These ones, the homes are bigger. They have got swimming pools. These ones, the home are smaller. The materials of the homes are different. This one has more greenery. This one has less greenery. So there is the collectivity of all of these that go together, that make a city, make a neighborhood of a city what it is. We can analyze them one at a time, but we wanted to understand the entire thing together. We call these phenotypes of a city, and this is a term taken from biologists and bioinformatics, that it's the entirety of it. And we are not the first to do this. In fact, this was done in London in the late 1800s. Somebody named Charles Booth wanted to measure poverty in London, so he went and looked at homes. And this is his description, that great number of apartments, sudden lapse in the apparent goodness of the location. One with windows clean, good curtains, blind, while next door has dirty windows. So Booth started to look at homes, except that it took Booth 4 years to do this. We wanted to do this in a matter of minutes and days. So we took satellite images. We take images, this could be street images, and we put them through a neural network, an AI program, and it tells us both things about one thing. In this case, it's telling us about poverty in London. This is observed, this is predicted, this is So the redder this is, the better off the area of London is, and the images can tell us. They can also tell us about something about health. So just taking the street images and about income. This is a living environment, deprivation and income using images. So the bigger the circles at the beginning are, the better the model predicts. But the model doesn't predict crime very well. So images don't tell us about crime, because it may well be the case that crime happens everywhere in the city, and they don't tell us about some other things. So back to the case of Accra, we took the satellite image and we fed it through a neural network, and we basically asked the network to divide it into places that look the same. And we sort of used a neural network that could do this. And what it did, I'm showing you the results for 8 things. The neural network divided Accra without any human sort of knowledge and information. It was entirely the computer doing this, into 8 areas. There was water, so here. There was dense greenery, so this is outer Accra. There is light vegetation coming more towards the city. This is the borders of Gama, There is empty land. There is a bit of this towards here, which I understand used to be mining areas and are currently still empty. Then there is dense areas, either with homes being in the north-south direction or being rotated. And then we have got buildings surrounded by vegetation. You can see a lot of that in Legon. And then we have got roads and a sparse. So these are places that have a lot of roads, and you can see samples of images. So to take a couple of these, dark and dense vegetation in Accra, where is it? We have highlighted these ones here, around the body of water, around the edges of Gamma, but also some in this part, just at the sort of edge of Accra metropolitan area. These are places that are generally far from major roads. They have high greenery in them. This is the areas that have very dense and the buildings are rotated. So you start seeing parts of Nima Mamobi, parts of other areas of London that are very dense with rotated buildings. And this is the distinction between those that are rotated and those that are not, very close to each other. So finally, where this work is going through work of colleagues again at the University of Ghana and University of Massachusetts, we are focusing on particular groups. So schools are one of them. Our colleagues are doing studies in 100 schools throughout the Greater Accra metropolitan area. Maybe one of the schools that the students are present it may be one of them. They are measuring air pollution. They're going to measure the quality of the playing area, the amount of greenery, and some of the vital signs of the students are being monitored to see how it may be affecting health. We'll be focusing increasingly on temperature in the schools and greenery and ways of cooling it. So this is the situation in Accra. This is my last slide. So what do we do with all of this information? And one of the things you learn as you do your research career is that everything you say, somebody has said it before you. And so if you look at the date of this paper, it was written in 1917. That's 107 years ago. This paper is written by Charles Chapin. Chapin, if you were in the US, he would be a well-known person. Chapin was the commissioner of health for city of Providence, but he actually became the founder of modern public health in the United States. He became the president of American Public Health Association. And at that time, Chapin, who was a very rational person, asked the question of, how do I improve health in my city? I want to improve it. And he used information, he used knowledge to focus on things that the city could do as priorities. So there are the classical environmental issues, food contamination, milk contamination, and waste disposal. This was the classical public health. But there was a whole lot of other things. He argued that the city needs better data and better education. So we need an educated population, but we also need to monitor it. So vital statistics. We need laboratories. He argued he realized that the city needs to take care of its poor. He realized that we need, sorry, I'll go back if I could go back. We need services. So we don't just improve the health by improving environment. We need clinics, we need doctors, we need places that people who need care can go. And in some ways, we are aspiring over 100 years later to do just what Chapin did more than 100 years ago, which is, how do we take the city in its entirety and everything that it does for people, good and bad, and understand it and learn it in a way that we can improve health, especially, and reduce health inequality. So with that, I will end, and I look forward to any questions and comments that you may have. Thank you very much.
Another round of applause for Professor Ezzati. Well, uh, it is good to live in cities because it leads to good public health. If you live in cities, you are likely to live a good public health because of what is called service delivery. Good service delivery will lead to good public health. So water, electricity, health facilities, good road schools, etc., etc. So he has shown that yes, it is good for all of us to live in the cities because cities will improve public health because of good service delivery. But he made a very important point that yes, okay, so if we live in cities, if we all like to live in cities, at the same time, there are inequalities like access to the services. People live in Accra, they don't have money to pay electricity bill, they don't have money to pay, for their housing, etc., etc. So access, so the service is provided, but because of affordability, because the person does not have money, he cannot access the water, the electricity, the schools, etc., etc. So that's one of the inequalities that he said. The other thing which I found interesting is the status of people in the city. So in the cities, there are people with several statuses, right? Some are laborers, some are university lecturers, some are doctors, some are lawyers, some are judges. So because of our status, people's status, their access or affordability may be reduced or may decline. I mean, that's also one of the things that he said. But the other thing which came up in the lecture is the whole issue that if you live in cities, you are exposing yourself to several sorts of pollution, air pollution, noise pollution, what have you, all kinds of pollution. And that is why I have seen some friends who have lived in Accra and they say, oh, we just want to go to our village and go and breathe the natural air in our villages. People don't want, they're fed up living in Accra because they feel that there is too much pollution in Accra, pollution of all kinds, so they want to go to their rural areas. And that brings to mind the whole issue of if we are talking about cities as an equal opportunities for good health, we should also be talking about rural areas as an equal opportunities, for good health, particularly in Africa. I always say that, so from the lecture, he made two things that, okay, you live in cities. How about those who live in the rural areas? If you live in the cities and don't have access to these things, how about those who live in the rural areas? I mean, very important point that he raised. But you see, he mentioned Chelsea, he mentioned, Kensington, he mentioned London, he mentioned Florida and all that. But you see, if you go to these areas, the public health system, the service delivery system is good. But if you come to Africa, and outside the Ghanaian example, Ghana has 261 district assemblies, 261 district assemblies. And out of the 261, 6 of them are metropolitan areas: Accra, Tema, Cape Coast, Takrady, Tamale, and secondary Takrady. 6. The metropolitan areas, they are supposed to be the apex. They are supposed to have the good service delivery. But you all know that the assemblies themselves cannot enforce their bylaws. If you go to Chelsea, if you go to London, if you go to Kensington, if you go to Florida, the bylaws are enforced. Over here in Ghana, people play music up to 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. Nobody cares. So the point is that we also need to look at our compliance levels when it comes to looking at the way people live in cities and in rural areas. I think we also need to look at this a very important issue. How do we enforce our rules and regulations within, our cities? And if you look at the 6 of them I've mentioned, they have not been able to deliver because of compliance level. Even they cannot enforce their bylaws. In Kensington, in Chelsea, in Florida, they can enforce the bylaws. The city authorities can enforce their bylaws. In Ghana or in most African countries, we cannot enforce our bylaws. So I think that's one of the things that he has also mentioned. But I want to raise a very important issue that if you look at COVID, COVID has affected the mortality rate of COVID is higher in the cities than in the rural areas. I have a classic example. When I go to my hometown, they tell you that you people in Accra, you are bringing COVID to us, so we don't want to associate ourselves with you. And we need to actually unpack. Why is it that in the rural areas, we have fewer cases, fewer mortality cases of COVID, whilst in the urban, centers, we have higher mortality rate? Maybe this is one of the things that we need to look at. And then, of course, is it good to live in a city or to live in an urban area with several peri-urban areas which are not fit for purpose, which are not habitable, and live in the rural area where you can have all the things that you need, all the fresh air, all the good accommodation, housing, and all the good things that you can have, right? Rather than live in a peri-urban area and live in squalor and poverty. My final point. You see, when you are talking about, cities, and then the inequalities, and then its linkage to public health, we also need to understand the culture of people. We have tended to forget the culture of our people. And I think we need to work at it. How can we develop a culture that will promote public health? A culture which will enable us to ensure that public services are delivered on schedule, and we also need to develop a culture of compliance which will enable our rules and regulations to be well enforced and implemented. On that note, join me again to thank Professor MAJID EZZATI for the lecture. Thanks again. I leave the floor to the Assistant Honorary Secretary.
Right. We thank our distinguished chair for such an elaborate summary, extended summary, actually, of this wonderful lecture. So all too soon, this lecture, interesting in all respects, have come to an end. I wish to, on behalf of the Academy, say thank you to all of us for making time to be here. We recognize the officials of the Academy who have made their presence here in person. We also acknowledge all the fellows who are online. A special recognition to the President of the Academy, Professor Kofinti, Vice President of Sciences, Professor Emerita Isabella Kwachi, and all our distinguished fellows present. Also, we recognize the presence of the Registrar of the University of Ghana, Mrs. Emilia J. Mensah. And we have in our midst senior members of the Academy and also senior academic faculty from our higher education institutions. We are most privileged to have Labone SHS, Achimota School, and Presec students here. We thank you very much for making the time and the effort to be here to listen to this excellent lecture. Yeah. So we are being informed that refreshment has been served right outside the auditorium. And for students, because you need to set off in time, your refreshments will be packed and then organized on your way in the bus. So with these brief comments, I would like to thank all of us for your presence and your time, and to wish all of us a good evening. Thank you. All right. So once the program has come to an end, the speaker, chairperson, and will be recessing from the podium. So may I kindly ask that you respectfully stand whilst they recess. Thank you.